All right, who's next on the list?
Next on the list is Dylan Sampson, running back, Tennessee, 5'8" 1/8", 200 pounds, 8 3/4 inch hands. Richard, he's 20 years old. He will be 21 in September. He didn't participate in the 40 or anything like that. He did have a broad jump of 124 inches, so 10'4", and then a vertical of 35 inches. Last year at Tennessee, he had 258 carries, 1,491 yards rushing, 22 touchdowns, 20 receptions, 143 yards, and no receiving touchdowns.
Yeah, so Dylan Sampson, we were talking pre-show, is definitely a running back that I am higher on, it seems like, than you guys. He's out of the 6 guys we're going to talk about, he's my running back 3 out of the 6 guys. Obviously, there's some more people that are going to jump him. But, watching Samson carve up the SEC defenses is like seeing one of those hibachi chefs that dice up the onions and turn it into a volcano. Precise, quick, leaving everybody smiling when it's all said and done. I mean, to me, this is a guy who just has a sense for how the blocks are going to unfold in front of him. Kind of like when I talked about Brees, he was like Chinet, Tecmo Bowl. I mean, if there's a crease, he's the grease. Because that's my hashtag for Dylan Sampson. If there's a crease, he's the grease. I mean,
I like that.
He's patient enough to let his linemen set the table, and then boom, dude, he's slicing with his one cut, and he's smoother than a Tinder pickup line. I mean, this guy is out there, and he's just getting. I love the way that he moves between the tackles, and when you first see him, I'm telling you, I didn't know anything about Dylan Sampson going into this. He caught me completely off guard. I'm like,
there's so many running backs, it's hard to be up on all of them.
Yep. And what I do first is I go through the combine notes, and everything. I'm putting in 5'8", 200 pounds. I'm like, okay, 5'8", okay.
Why is he the second guy we're talking about?
Yeah, I'm like, okay, big deal. And I'm watching his tape, and I'm like, look at him go. I mean, you watch him against Georgia or Florida. I mean, he's pressing a line, then hitting a jump cut that freezes that linebacker like a popsicle in a blizzard, and he's just going, right? He's on
a roll. That's 3 or 4 really good ones.
Yeah. I never
Here comes the clunker. No.
I like turtles. So I never saw him I think only twice. He's the player and he's early in the process. I watched all the Ashton Genty. I couldn't stop watching his tape because I wanted to make sure I'm okay, am I just excited to watch rookies again? What is going on here? I just watched Ashton Genty.
Quarterbacks don't count.
Yeah. But no.
Some of those guys, Tyler Shuck's so old, we can barely even count him as a rookie.
And I was surprised.
On the weeding pad.
When you first start watching his tape, he's consistently just being used between the tackles. And you're like, oh my, but yep. He's consistently 4 yards. And his footwork in between the tackles to me is absolutely beautiful. I mean, playing the SEC, he's doing this against Georgia, Florida. His contact balance. You guys said you didn't like it. I thought it was pretty nasty. He had a really nice spin
I didn't
move.
say contact balance. I said power.
Power. Okay.
Different thing.
Contact balance. I thought excellent. Spin move. Pretty nice. Second gear. He's got it. I mean,
he totally has a second gear.
And I thought in the short yardage, I thought he did well. And I think it showed too on tape, with how many touchdowns that he got. And they used him at that goal line in the SEC, being 5'8", being 200 pounds. I mean, this guy, again, is he built to be the bulldozer? No, I don't expect from that. And I really want, but again, 35 touchdowns over the last 3 years to me just screams value for a guy like him in upside. So I love his burst. I love his vision. I love his feet. I love the way that his ability to score. Obviously his size is a concern. A little raw in the passing game, he's just okay there. Everything I saw was just kind of dump off passes, screens, simple stuff.
I think he didn't have a lot of opportunity.
Right.
Not a lot of opportunity.
I think he looks natural catching the ball for the most part, though.
Happy with it.
Yeah.
But unbelievably impressed with the way he navigates in between the tackles, whether it be the A gap or the B gap. He looks fantastic. Didn't know anything about the kid. Came away extremely impressed. And right now, I haven't dug into Cam Scatteraboo, but I already watched Trevion and Quinshawn. I watched Hampton. I watched Genty. So who's going to slide into that 5th, 6th row? He's going to be in right around in that area. I've got a couple more guys. Obviously we have a lot more guys to watch, so it could change. But right now, Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee, really like his tape a lot. And I'm excited to see where he ends up. Because obviously we're talking tier base. I think Ashton Denty's in his own tier by himself.
I would agree with that.
So to me, tier 2 would be Trevion, Quinshawn, Mario, and Hampton right now. I haven't watched any Caleb Johnson or anything like that either. So we'll see. That's clear too. If I go to tier 3, as of it stands right now, Dylan Sampson is on the very top of that list. And I can't wait to see where he goes in that opportunity, because that could kind of like lock him in up to being that running back like 5 for me. And it's kind of like, remember, like I got real excited about Achane the same way. Like, guys, you guys liked Achane, but I was like, oh, this guy's unbelievable. Like, I think Dylan Sampson could be that. Obviously, he's not explosive like Achane, but I think.
But he is a very explosive runner.
He is. I think he could be that kind of runner.
He's got a second gear. He doesn't have a third gear. Like Achane had that third gear.
Achane had the third gear.
But
We have another guy we'll talk about that has a third gear.
But love Dylan, love Dylan Sampson. Don't like him. I really do love him. I think he's a really good running back prospect.
All right. So, the issues I think that arise with me, because I do like Dylan Sampson. You look at the numbers that he has, almost 1,500 yards rushing in the SEC, like you said.
Big time.
So over 1,600 all-purpose yards this past season, counting his receiving yards. That doesn't happen by accident, especially for a 20-year-old dude, man. So, like, there's a lot of room, I think, for him to grow, which is good. And there are some things that I think he needs to work on. I think he needs to bulk up a little bit. I think at 200 pounds, you're going to have a hard time operating between the tackles in the NFL. And he doesn't bring a power element to his game. He can do some things between the tackles, but I think NFL teams aren't going to want to grind him down like that. You know what I mean? So he's going to end up being used, almost as a Travis Etienne, how we want to see Travis Etienne used on the outside, get him a little bit of space where he can use some of that explosion. If you look at the numbers here, he was another guy that was a yards after contact type of guy, man. 929 yards. Which ranked 8th overall in the NCAA last year. 38 rushes of 10 plus yards, good for 12th. But when you start getting into the 15 yards and the actual yards, it starts dropping down a little bit, which tells a story to me. So the 15 plus, he had 17 of them, which is 22nd, and then 453 yards on those 15 plus, which is only good for 30th. So it makes it seem like he's rushing for 10 yards and 15 yards a lot, but not more than that. You know what I mean? So that kind of, I think, speaks to the not having the third gear to kind of like really break off the big runs. So that's just what I see when I look at the numbers and kind of when I see him play. So I don't want to be all doom and gloom, because like I said, I started this by, he got 1,500 yards. He can do some things. And I just think he's going to have to, I think, improve their pass pro.
Inconsistent.
Yeah, exactly. He was okay.
It's not my knock for him.
His frame just doesn't allow for much.
Right. Exactly. So I think he needs to get better there, but he catches passes. I think if you can get him in space, I think especially NFL offenses, they're going to see this guy as I don't think anyone's going to see him as a 3-down back in the NFL. That's my problem with him from a fantasy perspective.
I think it can be.
I think they're going to see him and see 200 pounds and go, all right, I think this guy, we can use him. I think he's going to be isolated and be like a 15 to maybe 17 touch per game,
which I'm totally okay.
Which is okay, but it's going to somewhat limit it and cap him to a certain section of RB. Like if he gets a ton of passes in that 15 to 17, maybe he'll touch those RB1 numbers. And if he doesn't, if they try to use him like they used him in college in between the tackles, that might be a little bit hard to come by.
See, the players that I kind of comped him to that I liked him a lot to was like Aaron Jones and Ray Rice were the two players I like to comp to a little bit. I went back and looked up their combine. He weighs just as much as Ray Rice did coming out.
I think Jones was laterally more explosive than Dylan Sampson, because Dylan Sampson.
That's why I said a mix of looks. Jones is definitely more explosive than
he uses Sampson. More subtle movements, I think, to make guys miss, and he's good at it. Don't get me wrong, but Aaron Jones brings a bigger, I think, burstier lateral movement to his game.
Aaron Jones obviously way better on the outside, and again, I really like Sampson's inside vision and footwork. Like I really like him inside. I didn't even get to see him outside that much, so not a lot of opportunity. So yeah, I mean, I get that too. I do think he can. He's still young, so I don't think
20 years old. Yeah, like that was like my last thing that I put on there. I was like, he's 20 years old,
one of the youngest in the class.
Yes, he has got a lot of room to grow, and he has skills. So I don't want to sound like I'm just totally down on the guy, because I'm not. I think I agree with you. He's going to be in my third tier. I don't think he's going to be at the top of my third tier from some of the stuff I've seen, but he's going to be in that third tier somewhere.
Come draft day, I bet that will change. I think a lot more to go, but I think he kind of like when we talked about earlier, like, when James Cook went behind a second, like, what's that? Like, I think Dylan Sampson goes day 2.
I think I'm a little bit closer to Rich than I am Matt on this. I'm not quite as high as Rich is on him, but I do like Dylan Sampson quite a bit. One thing I forgot to mention, I wanted to mention this with every player, and I forgot to do it for Ashton Genty. I wanted to give the run blocking grade in college for each running back as we go through, because I think it's a really fascinating number, and it kind of also shows what did they actually have to work with.
What they're working with.
You know, some guys, doesn't mean that you're better or worse if you had a good line. It just means, was it a little bit easier for you? Did you have more wide open lanes than maybe some other guys had?
Yeah, if you had 1,200 yards, but you had the number one run blocking team in the college football, that tells me, oh, you should have had 1,800 yards.
Right, and you also have 1,200 yards and you're the 90th ranked. Very different.
Very different. So yeah, it is very good. Very good point to point.
So Boise State was the 62nd ranked run blocking offensive line in the class. So when you look at in college football last year, so when you look at that comparison to the guys in the class, of course, Twitter doesn't want to work right now because I had them all listed. But all that being said, he was like towards middle of the road, towards the bottom though, of not very good offensive line. So Ashton Genty did a lot with not very much. However, when we take a look at Mr. Dylan Sampson, he even had less to work with.
Somebody pay Samson.
87th.
87th. I have these same numbers too.
Okay, 87th in the class. So he did a great job with not a lot there. I gave him above average marks. So these would be like 7.5 or above in many, many areas, including vision, patience, elusiveness, quickness. Obviously pad level. He's a smaller guy, so that one's not as hard. Game speed, burst. Like,
wait a minute. Are you measuring the pads from the ground?
Look, it's not that hard when all you have to do is go, and now it's not that far. You're good.
I kind of take pad level as, does he drop?
Is he
his
super
pads?
upright?
Yeah,
I get that. But for real, look at it. Some of the best pad level guys are shorter guys.
Of course,
if you take a look at it, take a look at it.
Oh, that guy who's 7'6", a really good slam dunker. He's really got to jump. I give that 10 out of 10 on dunks.
Yes, that's just
Bingo.
That's just physics.
That's just genetics, baby. So he got some really good marks everywhere. My only real concerns, like I said, I totally agree with Rich. I think the vision is totally on point. Good patience, like really good patience. Finds the hole. His feet are constantly moving. I love seeing guys where their feet are constantly moving. He's constant, and it's not there's a difference between a nervous movement of like, I just don't know what to do, and purposeful movement. He has very purposeful feet, which I really, really like. There's another guy that has more nervous feet. I'll talk about him later. But he has very purposeful feet, which I really like to see. My only big knock, he's not going to break a crazy amount of tackles, although for his size, he did pretty well in that area. I think he's got a little bit above average contact balance. I don't think it's special in any way, shape, or form, but I think he's a little bit above average there. That being said, I did give him a pretty low mark for physicality. He's not going to be somebody that's going to move the pile. He's not going to be somebody that runs through a guy into the end zone. He's not going, like, that's not going to be his game. Nor should you expect it to be at 200 pounds and 5'8". Like, I think that's kind of an obvious, although Ashton Genty's 5'8", but he weighs a lot more and plays with a much different level of physicality.
There are guys that at any weight, they play behind their pads.
Right.
They're giving everything and they know how to.
He's closer to a track guy than he is.
They know how to link everything up and coil and pop. You know what I mean? And he doesn't have that.
Right.
He just doesn't bring.
That's not his. So that would be my only real concern. But we kind of had this discussion of like, could he be a featured back in the NFL or not? And for me, that's almost like, it's almost become irrelevant. I don't want to say it's become irrelevant because touches matter. They absolutely do matter. But the way the NFL game has changed over the past 5-6 seasons, where you see, I mean, James Cook is a featured back. Devon Achane is more or less a featured back. Gibbs is in a timeshare, but certainly not hindering. He was the number 1 overall back this past year.
Number 2 over Dynasty back. I don't think it's hindering you.
No, Chase Brown, I mean, is a guy with a similar build, and he did some really good things. So for me, it's not like you would ask me 5-6 years ago when I first started doing this, I would have been much more concerned about the size out of a Dylan Sampson and the lack of true power than I am now, because NFL teams, while they do care about that, they are much better at playing to player strengths, specifically in the running game, than I think they've ever been before. And I think some teams are going to find his strengths, and I think he's going to be a very solid NFL back. Right now, I have a 73.33 on Dylan Sampson. That is my 7th ranked running back in the class. And I've basically gone through everybody. There's a few names that I haven't quite graded yet, but I don't anticipate any of those names being top 15 type of guys.
Big fan. Real big fan.